When 12-year-old Douglas Colvin learned that the members of the Beatles' predecessor band, the Silver Beatles, adopted stage names, he saw it as an act of rebellion. Having been raised on U.S. Army bases throughout the world, Colvin felt removed from the counterculture youth of the 60s and admired from afar the spirited rebellion typified by the Beatles and their fans. Inspired by Paul McCartney's choice of pseudonym, Douglas Colvin started going by the name Dee Dee Ramone. Colvin's parents eventually split up and he settled with his mother in the Forest Hills neighborhood of Queens, New York. Here he met fellow Beatles fan John Cummings. Cummings, along with Forest Hills high school classmate Thomas Erdely, started a garage rock band called Tangerine Puppets in 1966. They played a few shows, including one at their high school, which caught the attention of Erdely's friend, Monty Melnick, and another show opening for a garage rock band, the Knickerbockers. Cummings was so intimidated by the headliner's skill that he called it quits, thinking he could never achieve such prowess. That was in 1967. The Tangerine Puppets broke up and its members moved on from high school. Erdely continued to pursue a music career, playing in multiple successive bands with Melnick. Playing small-time gigs throughout the city allowed the two to form connections in the music scene. Erdely eventually found a job at the Record Plant Studio on West 44th Street as a studio engineer, and he and Melnick later built their own rehearsal studio at 23 East 20th Street. Cummings drifted aimlessly, taking a number of blue-collar jobs until he found himself working construction at 1633 Broadway. He recognized one of the mailroom employees as his neighbor, the aforementioned Douglas Dee Dee Ramone Colvin. They started hanging out and talking about music and soon started going to various concerts along with Erdely, who continually suggested Colvin and Cummings start a band together. Cummings dismissed this notion until the three of them saw the New York Dolls play at a small club called Nobody's Bar on Bleecker Street. They were limited musically, Cummings writes, but they knew what to do with what they had. It was at that moment Cummings started to consider rock music as a viable career choice. The two toyed with the idea for about 2 years while continuing to explore the city's music scene. Colvin began to write songs, most of which feature the word "wanna" in the title, and tried out for a band called the Neon Boys with Tom Verlaine, Richard Hell, and Billy Ficca. It was Colvin who first spotted Jeffrey Hyman, aka Jeff Starship, lead singer of glam rock band Sniper. Sniper played regularly at the Coventry, Queens' answer to Max's Kansas City. At 6'6", wearing knee-high platform boots and a skin-tight jumpsuit, Jeff Starship easily stood out among even the glitteriest of glam scenesters. Perhaps he stood out a bit too far, as he was fired from Sniper because, according to his brother, he just wasn't pretty enough. Cummings, Colvin, and Erdely were already acquainted with Hyman from the neighborhood, but they weren't exactly friends. Early in 1974, Cummings found himself without a job. Hyman found himself without a band. Colvin found himself without anything to do. Erdely found himself without a project. Cummings gave in to Erdely's nagging and he bought a guitar. Cummings and Colvin recruited Hyman and friend Richie Stern. Erdely was to manage and produce the band. The original lineup didn't quite work out. Colvin couldn't play and sing at the same time. Hyman couldn't keep a steady beat. Stern couldn't handle the pressure of learning to play. Stern quickly left, and Colvin took over on bass. During one rehearsal, it became clear that Hyman's drumming skills were outmatched by his stage presence, so they moved him to the front, leaving the drummer's throne empty. Erdely reluctantly sat in as a placeholder for 4 years. When it came time to name the band, it was Colvin who, having already adopted the stage name Dee Dee Ramone, suggested the Ramones. There were no objections, and that was that. Everybody in the band adopted the surname, and the next time Joey, Johnny, Dee Dee, and Tommy entered the rehearsal studio, they were the Ramones. Hi everybody, Brendan here with a very special edition of This Month in Punk Rock History. It's August 2024, and this month in punk rock history, I'm joined by my producer, Sweet Jimmy, to talk about the Ramones, who played their first real show on August 16th, 1974. 22 years, 29 countries, and 2,263 shows later, they played their last show on August 6th, 1996. On this very special episode of This Month in Punk Rock History, Jimmy and I take a look at some of the Ramones' firsts and some of the Ramones' lasts. Special guest Daniel Galeotto is also here with a special 60-second album review. But first...
Take it, dude.
Ladies and...
Hey. This month in punk rock history, 60-second album review. Greetings from the underground.
The Sweet Jimmy Network. Yep, we're still here.
On March 30th, 1974, the three-piece Ramones hosted an open rehearsal at the Performance Studio. This is widely regarded as their first public performance. Only a small crowd of mostly friends, including Monty Melnick and visual artist Arturo Vega, were in the audience. Joey was taking so long to set up his drums that Johnny and Dee Dee became frustrated and just started playing. By the time Joey finally joined in, he did so without a seat on his throne. Dee Dee couldn't play and sing at the same time, and according to Johnny, stepped on a guitar and broke its neck. In his memoir, Dee Dee recalls being drunk and falling backwards into the PA. The New York Dolls were wrapping up a rehearsal when David Johansen and Sylvain Sylvain happened to catch the set. Johansen was less than supportive, telling them to give up. Johnny says it was so bad, their friends didn't even want to talk to them after.
Do I know you?
That first performance was disastrous, but the group persevered. The need for change quickly became apparent as Dee Dee and Johnny honed their skills while Joey's drumming was stagnant. Johnny wanted to fire him, but Erdely, who was acting as manager, convinced them to reconfigure after Joey was given the mic for an original song. Erdely moved Joey to the front. His awkward charisma, towering stature, and faux Britpop voice made him the perfect frontman, but now they needed a drummer. After several auditions, they gave up, and Erdely filled in. With the newly christened Tommy Ramone on drums, the quartet made their debut, opening for Angel and the Snake at CBGB on August 16, 1974. Johnny describes their appearance that night as a mix between New York Dolls / Iggy Pop glam and the leather jacket, blue jeans, sneakers look that would come to be their trademark. Dee Dee describes the show as okay.
I want to go down to the basement! I want to do it. I don't want to get in the basement too. Yeah, I know. That's 2 against 1. I really did. Really? Yeah, fuck it all. Come on, take it. Let's go. Quick, lively.
The bassist recalls an audience full of drag queens who, of course, overacted the role of enthusiastic fans, offering wolf whistles and catcalls between songs. The entire 12-song set was over in less than 20 minutes. In 1976, they released their first album and embarked on their first proper tour. Starting with a support slot for the New York City debut of UK pub rockers Dr. Feelgood, they next headed west for their first gig west of Manhattan. Due to severe weather at the outdoor Brunswick recreation area just outside of Cleveland, the show was canceled. So they went to the movies instead. And on June 19, 1976, Joey, Johnny, Dee Dee, and Tommy went to the Center Mayfield Cinema and caught Todd Browning's 1932 horror film, Freaks. In the film, the dwarf anti-hero Hans welcomes his bride, the conniving trapeze artist Cleopatra, into his group of freaks with a haunting chant. Joey rewrote the line as
Gabba gabba, we accept you, one of us. Gabba gabba, we accept you, one of us.
Which served as the intro that would become one of the most iconic songs in the Ramones catalog. According to Dee Dee, Pinhead was a collaborative effort, including, quote, even Tommy. The title of the song is borrowed from the Bill Griffith comic book character called Zippy the Pinhead, who was himself inspired by the same film. The Pinhead became a band mascot who would appear on stage for that song, handing Joey a sign which reads Gabba Gabba Hey, thus, like Hans, encouraging his audience to chant along. Over the years, several people have donned the Zippy mask, including drum roadie Mitchell Keller, Joey's brother Mickey Lee, soon-to-be road manager Monty Melnick, Rob Zombie, Lars Fredrickson, and Eddie Vedder. The day after the canceled Cleveland show, the tour continued to Youngstown, Ohio, where, after their set, they befriended Cheetah Chrome and Stiv Bators of the Dead Boys. Joey and Stiv exchanged phone numbers, and, as the legend goes, upon conclusion of the tour, Joey convinced them to come to New York and audition for Hilly Crystal.
There is definitely something there. Hilly Crystal.
Cheetah Chrome.
That was good. That was really good.
Thanks, sir.
That means a lot, you know.
Your dog is creeping on the floor, sir.
Yeah, he does that.
1, 2, 3, 4.
2 weeks later, on the bicentennial of the United States, the Ramones hit the UK. With a support slot between the Stranglers and the Flamin' Groovies, the Ramones were welcomed with open arms by the Brits. Influential DJ John Peel had been playing tracks from their first album nearly every single day since May, building anticipation. They played one gig each on July 4th and 5th at the Roundhouse and at Dingwalls, respectively. Among the crowds were members of the Sex Pistols, The Clash, The Damned, The Pretenders, and who knows how many other new or future punks. Johnny claims to have recognized the critical role the UK punks would play in the new movement. Joey was struck by the fashion, more aggressive, outrageous, and purposely offensive than the Hells Angels Fonzie look associated in the US with, well, punks. The older definition: hoodlums, lowlifes, dregs of society, the kind of people you'd see hanging out in the Bowery. After Dingwalls, the boys from the Bowery hit the West Coast for the first time in continued support of their sire label mates Flamin' Groovies at the Roxy in West Hollywood. Hollywood's answer to John Peel was Rodney Bingenheimer, who had just started DJing for KROQ in Los Angeles and opened his first show with the Ramones. Following the second Roxy gig, the band and crew attended an after-party at the Rainbow. Joey's brother/roadie Mickey Lee recalls pulling the car up for Joey, Tommy, Arturo Vega, and some girls. They were pulled over immediately on the way back to the hotel and searched. Tommy and the girls were let go, while Joey, Mickey, and Arturo were cuffed and crammed into the back of a Beverly Hills PD squad car. An in-depth search of Joey's jacket turned up only vitamin pills. Disappointed that their drug bust went bust, they eventually charged Joey with drunkenness and made him spend the night. Mickey would end up spending the night due to his failure to produce an ID. Arturo was released following a fruitless warrant search. From the very beginning, the Ramones were presented as the all-American band. They were a return to good old-fashioned rock and roll, but for a modern age. Visual artist Arturo Vega helped present this image. Vega provided the photograph used on the back cover of the first album, a jumpsuit-era Elvis Presley-style eagle belt. Before wrapping up 1976, the band stopped in Washington, D.C. in October. Here in the nation's capital during its bicentennial year, decorative Americana was everywhere. Vega was struck with inspiration. Upon returning to his Bowery loft, Vega went to work on the Seal of the Ramones. A parody of the seal of the President of the United States, the Ramones logo features the same encircled eagle, but the olive branch in its right talon is replaced with the branch of an apple tree, and the arrows in its left talon are replaced with a baseball bat. After all, what's more American than apple pie and baseball? The President's eagle holds in its beak a banner reading E Pluribus Unum. Vega kept the banner, but changed the words to Look Out Below. Finally, the eagle is circled with Joey, Tommy, Johnny, D. Subsequent changes reflect changes in lineup, an issue that would later lead to one of the band members leaving. More on that later. In April 1977, the Ramones embarked on their first ever European tour. Along with the Talking Heads, they played Switzerland, France, Belgium, Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, and wrapped up in England. It was the first European tour for the Talking Heads, too. It was a big deal, but the bands didn't get along. Chris Frantz and Tina Weymouth didn't care for Johnny Ramone's dictatorial attitude, and while the Talking Heads sought to embrace the culture of their host countries, the Ramones were shocked that they couldn't get a simple hamburger in France. At least the Ramones explored some of the tourist traps, stopping to see Stonehenge while touring England. Most of them anyway. Johnny refused and stayed in the van. I was upset, he writes, that we stopped to look at a bunch of rocks.
We're gonna do Stonehenge tomorrow.
No, we're not gonna fucking do Stonehenge!
The tour started in Zurich, and after 2 days of Talking Heads and the Ramones crammed into a single bus, they arrived in Marseille. The Ramones set up their equipment for a sound check, and halfway through their second song, the lights went out in the club. Between the crew and the bands, they managed to restore power, but only for a minute. When the lights went out again, Monty threw in the towel as, according to Chris Frantz, not only had the power failed in the club, but in that whole quarter of Versailles.
Why not?
You see, the electricity has been neutralized all over the world.
2 days later, they returned to France. This time, the electricity stayed on too well. During the Talking Heads soundcheck, frontman David Byrne received such a severe shock from the fully grounded mic that, according to Mickey Lee, he was knocked to the floor for a good 10 minutes. The show went on more or less as planned, though during the Ramones set, Joey also took a few jolts, but managed to stay standing. Upon return from Europe, the Ramones and Talking Heads parted ways for a time, and in November 1977 they reunited for a pair of shows with Eddie and the Hot Rods. At the second show in Passaic, New Jersey's Capitol Theater, a roadie set up a tea kettle on a hot plate for Joey to use as a vaporizer to steam his vocal cords before his show. The lid was stuck open, so a piece of tinfoil was secured in place by a rubber band. Halfway through the Talking Heads set, Joey leaned in for a few more hits of steam. When the rubber band gave way, the foil lid went flying, and the boiling water burst onto Joey's face and upper chest. Joey was rushed to the local emergency room where he was treated with a lot of salve. Refusing admission, Joey returned and the band cranked out their usual 24-song set with at least 2 encores, while the ointment dripped off the frontman's face. Photographer Bob Leaf snapped a few shots of Joey's melting face that night. He claimed Sire Records boss Seymour Stein tried to buy the unflattering photograph in order to suppress it. Years later, Leaf met Joey at NBC Studios in New York prior to the band's appearance on Tom Snyder's Tomorrow. Leaf says Joey, quote, threatened my life, should it ever be published again. Joey's time in the Burn Center was captured by Danny Fields, who photographed the punk singer with his trademark tinted glasses and leather jacket over pajamas and slippers. Between the pain and the boredom, Joey began to formulate a new song, as he just wanted to be sedated. By the time Joey recovered from his tea kettle-induced burn sustained in New Jersey, it was time to head across the Atlantic once more for a tour with the Rosillos. They spent Christmas in London, which was effectively shut down for the holiday, and while the Sex Pistols were saving Christmas in Huddersfield, Joey was stuck in a hotel room with nothing to do, nowhere to go. On New Year's Eve 1977, they added Generation X to the lineup. It was the biggest venue Generation X had played in their short history. In his book, Billy Idol recalls the crowd, quote, anointing them in a hail of gob.
What they called gobbing, which was spitting at the performers.
It was great, Idol writes, to open for a group that was so influential to us and to the whole punk scene. Linda Stein remembers Idol pouring champagne over her head. In Everett True's book, Stein says she grabbed Idol by his collar, put him up against the wall, and called him a, quote, fucking idiot. Backstage was Johnny Thunders, Johnny Rotten, Sid Vicious, and of course Nancy Spungen, and Elton John, who, longtime sound engineer collaborator Ed Stasium remembers, was rather generous with his pound of cocaine. In Monty Melnick's book, Stasium recalls recording several shows from that tour, but they all decided to use the gig at the Rainbow. Johnny writes, quote, I think our peak, our greatest moment is that New Year's Eve show, and that it was, quote, the best show that the Ramones ever did. The show was recorded and later released as the Ramones' first live album. It's Alive was released in the UK in April 1979, but didn't hit American shores until 1995. It was the last album to feature Tommy Ramone on drums. In late December 1978, an NYPD patrol car stopped to check out an unoccupied double-parked car. The unwitting patrolman walked into an armed robbery and was shot and killed. 10 days after that patrolman's death, a New York City transit cop who was investigating a robbery in progress survived a shotgun blast next to the 3-pound bulletproof vest he bought for $125. The contrast of these incidents led to a PBA campaign to outfit every officer on patrol with a bulletproof vest. Fundraisers were held throughout the city, and donations were received from the worlds of business, Broadway, and rock and roll. Punk magazine's Legs McNeil organized a benefit event at CBGB. Held on April 10, 1979, Red Bank, New Jersey's own jingoist punk rockers Shrapnel opened the show for headliners The Ramones.
Yeah, the Ramones!
Who took the CBGB stage for the last time. Liberal Joey was less than enthused, while conservative Johnny loved it. We even had protesters outside the club, Johnny writes. These commies. Marky says the band was criticized, but that it was a collective band decision, not just Johnny's. They saw it as a benefit for New York. Details are scarce, but Marky calls the event successful. Joey's girlfriend, Robin Rothman, is quoted in Mickey Lee's book as saying, quote, I was listening to a news story about some cop that was saved by a bulletproof vest, and I thought to myself, wow, the Ramones may have actually saved some lives.
End of part 1.
Next time on This Month in Punk Rock History. Blah. Coming this September, part dos, which is Spanish for 2. Stay tuned.